Alex O'Connor in New York City. What's the date, Travis?
June 1st. June 1st, they go head to head. It's just going to be those two guys on stage, mano a mano, and it's going to be a slugfest. Is the Bible true? What do you guys think? Let us know in the comment section. Is the Bible true?
Real quick, John. Is the Bible true?
You don't want a Petersonian answer. Mostly.
Mostly, Travis. Is the Bible true?
Mostly, John. Like, what do you mean?
I mean, what do you want from me?
If you're talking about the as true as an arrow's flight, as Jordan Peterson might say,
yeah.
Like, okay, in some version of like coherence kind of truth or traditional truth, sure, but in any level of truth that we interact with in a day-to-day, which would be trying to describe reality and the objects in reality and how they correspond with the claims that we make about them. In that version of truth, no, absolutely
I will give you
not.
a scientific answer. So in a purely scientific and material sense, much of the Bible is not true.
Okay, it is. And I'll give you a real Petersonian answer. It's gonna be so Petersonian, it's meta Petersonian.
Even more than that?
The Bible is just about as true as Pinocchio. Now, moving on. Moving on, everyone. We are today talking about two very interesting topics. One of them is what's been popping up and has been the most popular in the Pangburn community so far, which is the difference between Islam and Islamism. What is Islamism? Is it Islam? How do those things work? And afterwards, we're going to talk about Tucker Carlson and Putin. Now, important in this clip, one of the first podcasts we made was about Douglas Murray and him being extremely popular. And on the channel, he has been extremely popular. Right, Travis?
Yeah, I mean, he's popping off globally right now. He's being trumpeted as the defender of the West, defender of Enlightenment values. And I think there's a lot of good arguments as to why he is that right now. One of the main things is that he is a strong resisting force to Islamism and Islam in general. And we're going to get into those nuances of the difference between Islam and Islamism. There aren't, I think, as many differences as we would hope there to be in the mind, but how people act on what they believe with regards to Islam, that's where we start seeing the differences between Islam and Islamism.
Before we go into the video, which is a conversation with Douglas Murray, was a part of with Sam Harris and Majid Nawaz. For those who know, Majid Nawaz is like a reformist Muslim. I want to also have John. What do you think the difference between Islam and Islamism is?
I'm not going to lie. The difference eludes me slightly, but I imagine Islamism is a particular view of the religion of Islam. A particular view that is, maybe a little bit more extreme, maybe is associated with particular actions that we in the West might not love. That's my guess, but really, I think I'd have to see the full clip one more time to get a better handle on it. Okay. But that's my guess. We're seeing if I.
For me, I think it would be a similar difference between a patriot and then patriotism. It might be a little different. I think it might be something similar to that.
I don't know that patriot and patriotism seems like there's less difference than Islam and Islamism to me.
Okay.
It's like. Yeah, I don't know. Islamism seems a little bit more extreme. I don't know. We'll see.
Okay. Well, let me put the video up, and this video is going to be right after they talk about steel manning Islamism, and Majid Nawaz said, "Well, I'm going to do it. I'm going to steel man it for the whole panel."
Care for liberal, secular, democratic. Okay. If you look at the notion that we in the West genuinely and sincerely, as societies, but especially as governments, care for liberal, secular, democratic values, that is actually quite easy to attack. I could actually still do it today. Because let's start with our foreign policy, and it's quite easy to see where, depending on where our economic interests may lie, that we will, in some instances, proactively support dictatorships abroad, and in other instances, proactively undermine democratic countries if they happen not to align with our economic interests or indeed toe the foreign policy line that we want to take. And there are clear historic examples of that, but the contemporary examples, that kind of stand out for us are especially countries like Saudi Arabia, where we've had historical alliances and relationships with absolute, total dictatorships. Now, the only region in the world where an absolute monarchy still reigns, and when I mean an absolute monarchy, I mean that the king can literally decide whether you live or die on a whim, is the Gulf, is the Middle East. And they are, whether it's Saudi Arabia or whether it's other Gulf monarchies, they are reigning supreme. And so the line that the argument or the notion that we sincerely as societies and as the state care for the advocacy of democratic values falls apart, especially when not that we're dealing with these countries on a pragmatic basis, but when we have a relationship with them where we share in their advocacy of their medieval culture. And so that may change now in 2018, but certainly from the invasion of Afghanistan onwards, we've had a very unhealthy relationship with Saudi Arabia, where we have subsidized the proselytization of a certain type of Saudi foreign policy. And so the Islamist argument would be that in terms of foreign policy, of course, the interest for freedom and democracy and secularism collapses the minute economic interest comes to play, and that's, in essence, the critique of capitalism. But it's not just in foreign policy when it comes to supporting dictators, and especially in the Cold War, we saw this with the US government sponsoring coups in certain countries, sponsoring the invasion of certain countries, the Bay of Pigs and the whole Iran-Contra affair, sponsoring the assassination of certain leaders abroad because they were in the wrong political camp. They happened to be in the Soviet camp, and of course that the US would undermine, even where people have elected them by the popular vote, the US would, in its foreign policy, actively undermine those popularly elected governments because they didn't align with the Western sphere of influence, but rather they fell in the Soviet sphere of influence. And so Islamists seize upon this when seeking to recruit Muslims to say that their advocacy for Western secular democratic values is insincere. But it becomes even more potent when you talk about it in the case of invasion of countries, right? So here you have President George Bush, who wants to, who in the name of freedom and democracy wants to spread that and decides the best way to spread freedom and democracy is by military occupation. And so, it's often sometimes the obvious is staring at us in the face, but because we're not subject to the consequences of that obvious, it isn't as important a point for us. But I can guarantee you that the case for freedom and democracy in the Middle East was dealt a serious and severe and literally violent blow by the invasion of Iraq, and there was no Al-Qaeda.
I think there's a lot there to talk about.
I think so too. That was really riveting, especially when we come to talking about what is Islamism.
Yeah. One thing, Don, I wanted to point out is, okay, first, the first part we're talking about hypocrisy. Yes. We should act on what we believe to be good when we're invoking foreign policy, and I get that. It looks bad when you treat Saudi Arabia like your little brother that has problems, but we're still going to keep feeding him money for the work he's doing, mowing the lawn or whatever. And then the second part of like military occupation, I'm not so cynical towards this. Like, what is the alternative that people think that we should be doing? Like, when there are violent, I'll just say evil regimes, basically, holding their country as prisoners and killing those who oppose. Like, how do you expect to deal with something like that if not by military means and occupation?
Man, I think there might be ways before we get to military means and occupation.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Obviously, if diplomacy is possible, you try to have diplomacy. But sometimes that's necessary, like with the Japanese after World War II. They were occupied for a bit. Germany was occupied to de-radicalize and denazify Germany. Yeah. That was a serious movement. I'm not exactly sure. I don't know. I in the right context, anyone should be sympathetic to those means.
So denazifying, okay, And then when we start talking about de-Islamifying, all of a sudden everyone takes on these attitudes like it has something to do with like, oh, poor brown people. Like, why is this the attitude? Why is it to so many people when you say we need to de-Islamify this particular area? How is it that these Islamist ran countries and states, why do we not view them like we view the Nazis of the 1940s?
Well, that might be because of a conflation between Islam and Islamism, or between nationalism and fascism, right? And maybe people hear like, oh, we have to take away the Islamist jihadist organizations, and they go, well, you just want to outlaw Islam then. You're trying to get rid of Islam. Not at all. That's not the point. And this is why I think it's interesting when Majid was talking about Islamism. He kept talking about it, it's political, it's governmental bodies against other governmental bodies. Islamism seems to me to be the intersection of government and Islam. That's Islamism. It's like this political force that acts in the world,
Right.
as opposed to like individual forces. And that we can totally fight that. Who wants to fight that, right? That'd be like Christianism would be like the Holy Roman Church going to conflicts in the Middle East or something.
Right. Yeah.
That's
a
in
good
modern
example.
context.
It seems that he wasn't. It seems that he was talking about a very specific type of intersection between Islam and politics that leads to the type of radicalism that we see in the Middle East. I imagine that there are versions of like Islam and politics that wouldn't be held under that label. But to the question, the answer to your question, Trav, is an interesting one. I think there's kind of two questions there, which is one: are they different at all? I would argue it's probably harder to drive out radical Islam from those countries than it was difficult to drive out Nazism. I'd say that one's a little bit more culturally entrenched. Maybe it's only because like it was the end of World War II, and we did a lot of hard work before that. But it feels like they're not exactly the same level of like, I guess, integrated is the best.
No, yeah. Look, even though like Nazism took on a kind of religious structure,
it was never.
It seemed to be quite clear once the curtain came down. It was in 1945. A lot of people were like, "Oh, okay, we're done playing house.
Yeah,
we need to get rid of this. The world's watching. We have no choice. We're being babysat right now, and babysitter's gonna give us a big smack if we don't get our act together." And obviously, when you're dealing with something where people are actually believing that they're in contact with invisible others or gods or whatever, that's a completely different story, I think.
Right, and I think the second question, which is the question you actually asked, which is why do people in the West disagree or see it differently, is fundamentally, I think they just think there's a good guy and a bad guy. I mean, I think that many people in the West kind of is their default mode, see the West as, as an oppressor force, as a discriminatory force, and therefore are just predisposed to cast it in the villainous role. And, by contrast, that means that, as you say, the quote unquote poor brown people must be put upon for no reason. While, when people, again, in the West think about World War II, it's very obvious that the Nazis have to be the bad guys in that situation. Although you've seen some I've seen apologetics from Imperial Japan in the most extreme cases, but that's rare.
But also look at how far we went, John, at our mistake in World War II with the Japanese, right? Like how many just completely innocent Japanese people that happen to be living in the United States and enjoying the freedoms that the country affords to them, and they had those completely ripped away from them. So this is a legitimate fear when we're talking about geopolitical issues and issues of war or potential war.
Sure. Yeah,
but I quickly just want to remind everyone that we're always going to be criticizing the winner because they're still here, right? That's just how it's going to be.
It's an interesting flip on the idea that history is always written by the victors. That's true, but also the victors are the ones who are around.
Who are always responsible for the results of history.
It's true,
right?
And I actually think that that's perfect because it conveys the idea of balance, which I wanted to jump on that you said, Trav, is that you're right. We should have healthy concern. But at the same time, again, this is something I've said before, you don't want to overcorrect into the, the poor brown people narrative. You just want to be realistic and realize that, people aren't angels or devils, but both. And,
Yeah.
you know,
Well, look,
it's
you
not
guys, we can look at Israel and Palestine right now, and people are making these same damn arguments.
It's true.
They're just like,
True.
ceasefire and
There
let
was
them
a
sort
ceasefire,
out their shit, and like
There was a ceasefire.
and then it got
October
broken
6th.
by
a lot of a lot of these immoral turds should just come out and say Hamas was right. They were justified.
I don't think
and
all
then,
of them are like. I don't think all.
I'm not
of them
saying
are.
all of them, but I'm saying that there are some of them out
Yeah,
there that are just like hiding behind like from the river to the sea, they shall be free. It's like, just come out and say it. Come out and say that you enjoyed what happened on October 7th.
Was that a Cenk impression? I can't tell.
No, I don't think Cenk is that far down that side. I wouldn't. I think that would be a straw man of his position.
I personally think he's got a little bit of anti-Semitism. A wrinkle of it, a wrinkle in time. Like he gets a little. He gets a tiny sweat droplet behind his ear when he walks by someone with a yarmulke. But other than that, like,
well, if Jordan Peterson was here, he'd be like, "Oh yeah, that damn Cenk Uyghur guy. He's really high in trait neuroticism and very, very low in openness, and very high in conscientiousness. This is a damn deadly combination, man. Like all kinds of finger action."
Yes, and he'd be correct. Yeah, very.
Oh, I forgot my point. I was going to say something, but
I'm sorry, I fucked you up.
It's okay. No, we were talking about the victor histories. The victor blames the responsibility. It's written by the. I totally forgot my point. It's over.
Yeah.
So, but you guys, with Islam and Islamism, look, here's something I wanted to bring up with this, because this is something I think about a lot when I'm putting out these videos, is people will engage in, let's talk about Muslims for a minute here. Muslims will engage in polls that will ask them things about like gay rights, and they will take action in these polls. It's an act to take action in these polls, right? And they'll click like, there's some disturbing polling data from the UK where UK Muslims thought that it should be illegal to be gay, not just to like show like homosexual affection out in public, but just be illegal to be gay, and this should be enforced by law. Now, those people who are clicking yes, it should be illegal to be gay, most people would not consider those people Islamists, right?
Correct.
They would consider them to be Muslims who hold particular beliefs, but they're not out there like trying to like kill gay people, right? That's not.
Or maybe create governments or influence governments to make those laws based on the Quran.
Now, here's where this gets interesting. If there was, say, this like, okay, we're going to rewrite legislation here, and we're going to actually decide that the Muslims are going to decide what we do with regards to what gay people are allowed to do. And then all of a sudden the Muslims decide and they vote to make it illegal to be gay, let's say in the UK, and that gets passed. Are they now Islamists, or are they still just Muslims that aren't doing anything that an Islamist would do?
I think maybe it ties to the justification as well. I think if they argue from a secular perspective that they vote against homosexuality and they're trying to maintain like a separation of religion and government, I wouldn't call them an Islamist. But if there is a real like, oh, the Quran says it's wrong, it's the word of Allah, I think that'd be Islamist. I think you're going to be a part of that Islamist group in the same way if you're a part of that fundamentalist Christian evangelicalism, right?
So by Dan's answer there, then that means that these Muslims who are engaging in this polling, this anti-homosexual polling data right now, the only difference between them being a Islamist and just a safe at-home practicing Muslim, the kind of Muslim the rest of the world wants to see, is the fact that their vote in that poll does not really count.
Yeah, that's 100% right.
And that's terrifying to me. What do you think, John?
I think people have always and always will vote with their values. I think where they source those values can be different. My level of, I wouldn't say that that's terrifying to me. I don't really think that we're there yet, but I think it is important to note that. I think that the observation that yes, people's values do come into their politics actually And not all of those values are always coming from John Locke secularism. I think that's important to know, and I think it's something that a lot of people have forgotten. So I certainly like the observation. I wouldn't say that I'm terrified. Maybe mildly concerned.
But I want to just remind people that, let's say I can think of myself as when I was like religious back in the day. I would technically, according to Jewish law, gay marriage is wrong. But I also was like, yeah, but I live in a secular nation. I don't care what people do. But if you ask me my opinion on it, I would say it was wrong for a man and a man to get married. Mm-hmm. So I think that's where those polls saying they support legislation to make homosexuality legal, or is it polling saying I think it's wrong for two men to get married?
So they've done both, right? The one that Douglas and Sam Harris often cite is the one where they show a positive support for legislation to outlaw homosexuality. And that was there was literally 2% that didn't want to see it happen, and the rest were.
Well, that's a problem. That's a problem.
That's actually insane. You're not even outlawing behavior. You're outlawing a irascible state of being.
Well, and this is and look,
literally an instinct. That's completely.
But would it be fair to say then that people in the 1960s in the United States were Christianists?
Sure.
Who were willing to, and it was disturbing how they were using their religion, and even some today, the evangelical community, we can call them Christianists in that sense.
Hell yeah, I think so.
High five.
Well, I mean, let's go. If it's a 1-to-1 comparison, if
they're voting to make it illegal for a man and a man to be together because their Bible tells them so, would we not put them in the same category?
I mean, again, if your definition of Christianist or Islamist is or secularist is just somebody who is Islamic, Christian, or secular who actually votes and participates in society in accordance with their values, then sure, because that seems to be the definition we're arriving at. So that's fine.
But you guys, we got to figure out where that line is, right? Because in Donon's response is very interesting that if that vote was not just a polling data, someone engaging in a poll, but it was actually a vote, some kind of democratic vote on legislation, then we would consider them an Islamist because now it actually matters and it affects people's rights. So that means that if we say that okay, let's just assume that these votes and these attitudes that are acted upon, because I consider the polling data an action, you're taking action. It's not just that you're keeping the idea in your mind, right? That what you believe about homosexuals, you're actually acting on it. You're actively engaging in society and voicing your opinion, right?
Isn't that inevitable though? This is a weird thing to me because it's acting as if the default mode is that people don't do that. And to me, it's kind of just an inevitability that everybody is going to act out their values in public life. I think that it's an odd aberration that religious people in particular have reduced the amount of ways that they do that recently a little bit. But if you're secular, you're doing the exact same thing. You are also enacting your values in public life in ways that affect other people. We live in a society.
But here's the difference.
Very famous.
So I think to answer
society. And people, put their values into practice in the ways that they can. I don't know.
But here's the difference. According to Wikipedia, which I pulled up, I was like, something. How about we don't speculate? We just find it out. It's often called political Islam, a religio-political ideology that advocates for Islamism, also known as al-Islam, are dedicated to realizing their ideological interpretation of Islam within the context of a state or society.
Yeah.
Within the context of a state or a society.
Right.
So I hear that and I go, yeah, that's what it is. When you vote to instantiate your idea of a Christian society or a Muslim society through a state apparatus, that would be Christianism. Judaism, we can give it whatever word we want to call it, but wouldn't that line up with that? I know you're voting with your values, but if your values are to vote in a Christian state or the rules and and the qualities of a Christian state or a Muslim state, you're an Islamist.
Sure. I agree, and I would say you can do this for secularism too, and I actually don't think you guys would object to this.
Secularism is not religion, though. It's the absence of a religion.
Yeah, but it's a value set.
I mean, everything's a value set, John. The fact you
That's
had to
that's
wear that
exactly
beautiful
my point.
turtleneck is a
That's
value
exactly
set.
my point. I'm curious.
That doesn't make it Islamism,
You
though.
guys reject that? Because from when we put the ism or the ist moniker in terms of
No.
like trying to instantiate your values in a context of a government or society, why limit that label and the apparently negative
Yeah.
connotations? Why limit that to specifically religious value sets? Why couldn't like any value set?
Yeah. So John, I agree with you. I think what you're getting at is like not just religious ideas can be radical. Like you can have radical, you know, like
Secularism.
anti-human well-being secularism. Of course, we've seen that in Soviet Russia. Anti-human well-being secularism,
Now it's China.
but not secular humanism. Matt Dillahunty will be calling me on my cell if I conflate those.
I love that point, but that actually wasn't. I love that point, but that actually really wasn't my point. My point wasn't that things that aren't religious can't be radical. I think everybody here is aware that you can be radical with basically anything. My point is just that there's nothing special, I would say, about voting for your values if you source your values from a religion, as opposed to voting to instantiate your values if your values come from somewhere else. Like I think you can say like secularist political philosophy versus like Christian political philosophy. I don't see a fundamental difference between those two things.
I do. I see a massive fundamental difference.
Explain.
I think the fundamental difference is that one recognizes the distinction between the state and religion, and the other one doesn't.
I think state and religion are just two outgrowths of the same fundamental body, which is just
No.
governing, which is of organizing values.
Why the hyper reductionism though? Why consistently trying to reduce in order to obfuscate? There's a distinct difference between a religion that bases itself in theology, theism.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we understand as religion. We understand it as.
Yeah.
I understand we can talk about civil religions and all that philosophy, but we're talking about Islam, we're talking about Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism, Judaism, all the isms. And there's a distinct difference between that and secularism, which believes that should be left out of the governmental sphere. That's the fundamental difference between the two. And when you blur that lines, just like if you do that in Islam, it's an Islamist thing. Wow, my camera cuts off in the middle of a monologue.
You said blur those lines, it literally blurred your face.
I can't believe that just happened.
I can respond though while his face is gone.
Yeah.
First of all, I am wounded that you think I'm trying to obfuscate. I am deeply hurt. That's number one. I'm just trying to be clear.
Okay.
I will again. I'm going to point out that while yes, obviously religion and non-religion are different things, fundamentally, when you're talking about how you interact with the state, I don't see why the difference is relevant. If you're trying to instantiate your values that not everybody agrees with, but you're trying to instantiate them and put them into practice into your government and society, I feel like if we're going to look skeptically at when the values come from religion, we should look just as skeptically when it comes from any secular philosophy. Yeah. Why not?
Well, and I would say that the core issue with all of these things when they come into contact with governance is dogmatism. The things being presented as incontrovertibly true. Now, to Don Don's point, you generally just it is a statement of reality as it is, what is going on in reality, that dogmatism tends to accompany most popular religions.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
But most secular ideas are not dogmatic. They are open to revision.
Technically speaking, that's true. I think practically speaking, that's not true.
Well, what do you think? Which secular idea do you think is presented as not open to revision?
Most of the idols of like cultural, like libertinism, like the Open Society.
No, you don't think that those are. You don't think that those are open to revision?
Well, for somebody like me and you, Trav, like of course, because like we're skeptical. But like if you talk to the average person on the street who considers themselves like secular or atheistic, they would consider it the highest of blasphemies to argue against that sort of thing.
I don't think so.
I don't actually believe that again on a macro scale, there's really such a thing. I think that secular. I feel like people are naturally dogmatic by default. And while I agree that individual people don't have to be, and that's wonderful, I like if you have like a value system that's secular, I feel like people are going to get dogmatic about that pretty quickly.
I think there is. I think you're right that there is a natural tendency towards dogmatism that is that served as a great feature in our early evolutionary history, because believing that you got the full grasp of something actually is beneficial. I don't need to give examples. I'm sure we can figure out why that is. And self-soothing, just to know that the sun will come up tomorrow, and that is an incontrovertible truth, even though it's possible that it won't. Right? It's just
maybe.
But when you start saying that, it's like I know I'm going to be able to feed my family, and what that does, to provide energy for the next hunt. Like these are things that are useful. But now when we get to where we are now, where it's less about the hunting and gathering and more about the war of ideas, in at least our context, dogmatism is a bug and not a feature. And how do we overcome that? Well, fallibilism as an ultimate maxim, including being fallible about fallibilism, is completely welcome, and it should be embraced.
Fallibilism is a hard sell, my friend. I have to say, like, again, even for people who aren't religious, like, like relativism when it comes to like sexual ethics or like abortion as a sacrament, like you can come up with like values that are as dogmatically held as any religious value, even looking at the secular world. That's really my point. Is that, again, this is why I was obfuscating earlier. Is the point is that any value set, regardless of what framing you put it in, can become dogmatic, and everybody. And then this is the important thing: people by necessity will want to see more of their values and less of the things that they don't like and that aren't their values.
I agree
that's
with
all
you.
Politics is.
Look, I agree with your description of
the stuff you think is bad, and that's true for everybody everywhere, regardless of the labels.
I agree with your description of reality that it is the case that any idea can become dogmatic. Dogmatism just means you believe that thing to be incontrovertibly true, which I think is a delusion anyway. But people believe. Yeah, but my statement was more a prescription for humanity that they should adopt fallibilism.
But if the prescription is like utopian, like I'm sorry, this is just my personal opinion. Call me cynical. I think that's a pretty utopian prescription.
Oh yeah, but hang on. Would you think that it's a utopian prescription to ask people not to rape children?
No, because I don't feel like it's fundamentally in opposition to human nature to neglect to rape children. I don't think that there's a lot of
but I would say the same thing about the relationship between dogmatism and fallibilism. I don't think I
think we could talk about that and look over the course of history, and I think we might see a record that indicates otherwise there. I think there's
John, I think it's when people get into their most dire circumstances, we even see around the world today how much people are willing to sacrifice their children. So for sex industry and whatnot, like we're not out of the woods by any stretch of the imagination on that stuff.
That's actually really fair, and I totally agree. Which is why it's important to have value systems, even those that may be dogmatic, that prevent that sort of thing. At least in my mind. But no, super interesting topic. I mean, again, I just don't like handicap religion as a value set as like particular dangerous, more than any other value set.
I don't know how you just don't see it that way. Like, I was listening in the background, everyone having camera issues. My phone completely overheat. And turned off.
Sets are worse than others. I'm not a relativist.
No, I know, but what I'm saying is that within a democratic society, if freedom of religion is a thing that we hold as fundamental to our ability to get together and govern collectively, having a system based on those religious preferences is entirely different than a secular one.
We already okay. Here, this is why we disagree. Because we already have a system that is based on religious preferences or religious-like preferences, because there's no such thing as a value power vacuum. The dominant value set just happens to be secularism.
No, but the one in which you're okay with making it the Christian, no, John, the difference between person who's Christian or the person who's Muslim versus the person who's an Islamist or a person who's a Christianist is that they want to see government as a Christian thing that pushes Christianity, not just their collective values. This will be things like, oh, we don't want any shops to be open on Sunday or Saturday.
Well, let's let's use the obvious. You guys, let's use the obvious example of Sharia law. Like these are Sharia laws in the polls all the time in the UK to see what Muslim attitudes are towards that, and many Muslims think that Sharia law should be implemented, and of course, you know that again, and that's where I go back to this issue of like, are those voting in the positive in those polls? Are they Islamists for voting positive in those polls, or are they only Islamists if they take further action beyond simply just voicing their opinion through a poll?
I think so, yes.
I actually don't think they're Islamists quite yet. I actually
okay. So you guys disagree on that?
I think
no. I think they're Islamists once they take the further action.
Yeah.
Once they try to
okay.
Just because you have an opinion, you have an opinion.
Yeah.
Right. That's fine. Like
as long as you don't try to push your value system to the dominant ones, then you're okay.
But if someone responds positively to a Nazi poll, right? If someone's like, should we be implementing Nazism, and they poll yes, is that just their opinion, or are we going to label them a Nazi?
Well, how about this? A Nazi who isn't a Naziist in this like weird language game that we're doing is someone who hates Jews and blacks, but doesn't vote that way because he recognizes freedom of religion and the equality of races under the law.
Which is kind of inherently opposed to what Nazi ideology kind of is, so which makes it weird. Which is why I actually wanted to touch on your guys' examples of like closing everything down totally on Sundays or stuff like that.
Before you do there, John, can we just leave that as a cliffhanger? I just want to thank everyone for being here today with us. This is a lot of fun. We love coming here every Sunday to have conversations for you guys. Please just take a quick minute to drop a like on the video. It really helps in the algorithm, and it gets more people involved in what we do at Pangburn. And what Pangburn's all about is good faith, helpful discourse. Good faith meaning being sincere with your intentions to have a good conversation, and then helpfulness, during the course of a dialectic, reaching out to help your interlocutor. Even if you fundamentally disagree on something, you're there to help them get the best versions of their arguments out of them so that you can interact with what's truly the essence of their ideas. So welcome to Pangburn if you're new here, and make sure you guys subscribe if you enjoy it here.
It's so real. So I want to say one more thing on this, and then I'll let you go, Don, and I think we probably want to get to our next topic. But
wow, it's a great topic.
I know. Well, it's the next topic is
now they're going to debate about the topic.
Okay, but let me just say this. The examples of like shutting the world down on Sundays, or any other examples you care to name, isn't a matter of kind, which is what I was really talking about, is how the differences in kind are irrelevant. It's a matter of intensity. It's a matter of put into practice. And I've actually been reading a lot about this recently. Kevin Vallier had a great book on like religious governments. Most religious thinkers don't actually think that being draconian with if religion ever gets control of the government, draconianism doesn't make sense. It's actually, in Catholic thought, it's actually opposed to human dignity and opposed to the values of Christianity to be forcing and to be that kind of way. So I would just point out that just because the value set comes from a religious place doesn't necessitate that is intense and draconian. And on the flip side, just because the values come from a secular place doesn't mean they have to be benevolent and
but who said that? Who said that?
Nobody said that, but that's been the implication. The distinction you've been trying to draw between religion and secularism, I don't know if you're intentionally trying to apply this. I don't think you are, but this is the effect that I think people might be getting. So I wanted to clear that up real quick.
Yeah, sure. You can be secular and be a communist. Doesn't mean that your idea with secularism is some sort of like you're a secularist. It's secularism. Mm-hmm. But Islamism is different in the sense the things that Islamism and Christianityism, or whatever you want to call it, or Judaism, again, whatever you want to call it, is that those are religious. They're theocratic, as secularism is not. That's the major difference.
It is, but when we say theocratic, well, I don't understand. the only thing theocratic means is the value set is being sourced from religion. It says nothing.
Yes, exactly. That's the problem.
Okay, but like you have to understand that difference is almost irrelevant.
No, how is that almost irrelevant? What do you mean?
It has nothing to do with intensity. It has nothing to do with how much it impacts your life. It just has to do with which values happen to be.
Which values you want the government to be based on.
Yeah. So it's just,
yeah, okay.
I want more of the good stuff and less of the bad stuff.
Sure, but
everybody.
I think that anytime you do that, anytime you put a Bronze Age text as the foundation for what you should have your government built around and enforce, that's a problem where secularism doesn't have that. You recognize everyone's Bronze Age texts just thing that they can believe, and that everyone has a right to believe them, but they shouldn't play a role in their government.
Right, and I would disagree, and I would say that this level of moral and cultural relativism leads to a type of social undoing that is completely catastrophic.
What more relativism are we talking about? That people are allowed to practice their religion so long as they keep it out of the public square and don't force it on anyone? You mean you've heard the thing before, right? Religion's like a penis.
What? No.
Never heard this before?
No, I've not. I'm ready.
Okay, John. Religion is like a penis.
Okay.
I'm glad you got one. Actually, I'm very happy you have one.
Fantastic.
I'm also glad, and I'm all the power to you if you think it's the best one out there, right? Uh-huh. If it's the biggest, the strongest, the most sought after. But please don't wave it around in public, and for God's sakes, don't shove it down any children's throats. Mm-hmm. That's what religion is in secularism. And my point, in religion, no one's shoving any dick down no one's throat. That's what I'm trying to say here. There's for some reason you're just not seeing the distinction between secularism and then all the other Bronze Age garbage that comes along on the other side. There's a difference here, and I don't know why you're just not.
By the way, I'm looking forward to clipping out what Don just said without context into a YouTube short.
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of going in circles a little bit here, and I don't want to do that. I will say, by the way, that even under like the most strict versions of Catholic integralism, religious freedom is emphasized. Although I am in no way as a Catholic, I just like to point that out. But yeah, a value set's a value set's a value set. I don't care. Like if one value set says nothing's better than anything else, and it's really mean if you're judgmental to people. That's a value set just as much as be fruitful and multiply. I don't care. I don't.
But secularism isn't just like a value set. It's a real position about a way a government views its constituents.
Yeah.
Right. There is a value set that goes. Only the Christian perspective is the one that matters, and everyone else lies outside of their ability to govern because it's not a Christian government. Right, Muslims can't serve in a Christian government. Muslims can serve in a secular government. Jews can serve in a Christian government, and it's vice versa within Muslim communities. And that's why it's Islamism. That's why it's evangelical fundamentalist Christianity. That's why it's like Haredi black strimal hats in Jerusalem. That's the problem. And for Islam, it's just called Islamism.
Well, you say fundamentalist. I mean, I'm not sure that something that I would consider to be a generally or vaguely Christian government would prevent anyone who's not Christian from running it.
That's what you believe, yeah. But check your other brothers in the Midwest.
Yeah, well, I don't really stake my thoughts to anybody other than my own, and the old.
But you speak for the Christianity. You speak for the Christianity.
The old dead smart guys. But that's about it.
Okay, we better move on to the next topic before John starts.
So interesting, yeah.
Before John,
do we hit the ad, or do we give them an ad break? Do we hit the ad?
Yeah. Okay, guys, bear with us. We're going to give you a quick advertisement here. I'm sorry, it's cringe, but we got to get it.
Travis hates it, by the way, guys. He just when we made the ad, I just want you to quickly know that all he thought to himself was, "I can't believe I'm going to make them watch an ad." But it's
not be so self-hating. You got to be confident. Once the moment for action comes,
okay, John. Okay.
All right, folks, Trav here. I have produced legendary conversations all around the globe: Canada, US, United Kingdom, Australia. And after a long night of discussions, I want to sit down and catch up on some cool intellectual content. But now that I'm in a new country, Netflix says, "Oh, I'm sorry, this content is no longer available." Enter Private Internet Access VPN, my intellectual companion. Private Internet Access VPN service is not just about unlocking Netflix or Disney Plus content. It's about unlocking a whole new world of intellectual exploration. Click connect, and suddenly you have access to a conversation from the other side of the globe that you never even knew existed. This sponsorship with Private Internet Access VPN is about all of us in this community. It is going to allow us to produce more legendary events that will last for years to come. With over 30 million downloads and a no logs policy that has been proven in a court of law, your intellectual property remains yours. It's not just a VPN, it's your shield against unwanted surveillance. All you need is one VPN subscription to protect all of your devices. Windows, Mac, Linux, iOS, you name it. With a mind-boggling Pangburn community discount for 83%, you're only going to be paying $2.03 per month. You also get 4 months free and a 30-day money-back guarantee. All you thinkers, debaters, and knowledge seekers, hit the link below to secure your new private internet access VPN deal.
Yes.
And now for the second part. No, I'm kidding. Like, holy fuck.
Wonderful crap. You need to stop being so hard on yourself. You know what's even
No,
more
correct.
wonderful? Our next topic.
I got to tell you something, John. My mom watched our conversations with Cenk Uygur. And the first thing she says is, what an idiot. But she was saying how when she first saw the short, she was like, you know, I was hearing what the idiot was saying, but I couldn't stop looking into that guy with the beautiful eyes. What's his name? You know, with the blue eyes. What's that guy's name? I was like, you mean John? John? Yeah, and then there's one with the beard. I was like, yeah, John. So first time I watched, I just looked at him the whole time. And then I had to watch it again to pay attention to what the idiot said. And, you know, John, you got it. Come on.
John, I'll actually, before you respond to that, I'll just say, like, I've heard from 2 other female listeners as well that you kind of caught their eye. You know, I don't want to pump your tires too much, but what do you have to say about all this?
I would say, 1, I don't need my ego bigger than it is, so please stop. Number 2, I'm very flattered, and that's wonderful. You know, I'm glad, I'm blessed, and I just try to make the most of it, I suppose. I don't know what to say to that other than thanks.
Okay, well,
Very good.
I was like, how do we get John?
Boring, wholesome answer. What do you want from me?
Well, you got him blushing anyway, Don.
Yeah, I know, I got him blushing. It's actually it's amazing how easy John blushes when a man compliments him.
It's true. It's true.
Yeah.
I'm extraordinarily humble.
Well, let's talk about Tucker Carlson and Putin. John, take this off because I don't know.
Okay, I've had this opinion the whole time. It has remained unchanged. Vladimir Putin, not really a good guy, kind of a bad guy. NATO has been very stupid in dealing with him. That was my takeaway.
That was your takeaway from the whole conversation?
That's my takeaway from the whole incident, like writ large.
John, what did you think?
Yeah, I think that it is good that Tucker Carlson interviewed him. I actually think it's a positive good. We need more conversation, not less. We need more transparency. We need to understand the world. We especially need to understand our geopolitical enemies. And even though I am sure he was propagandizing a little bit, like quite a bit, and he was
a little bit. I'm sure.
Quite a bit. What do you want from me?
John, okay, real quick before John says a little bit.
Our politicians propagandize too. It's more.
Yeah, everyone propagandizes, right? But we can do like everyone kills. All religions have fanatics. All governments and nations are the same. Everything relative.
I don't think they're the same.
Who's binging? Is it I'm binging? Are you binging?
It's my fault. I'm so sorry.
Jesus, John.
Debing yourself, John. This is a strike. Get your name on the board.
20 lashes.
Oh my God.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
John, just turn the notifications on your Tinder down a little bit. Like we don't need to
Grindr. I know.
Away. What do you want?
Here, but while John mutes himself and figures out his phone situation, apparently this is a hot takeaway. This is posted by the Telegram. CIA blew up the Nord Stream according to Putin. Let's go and watch this kind of maybe propaganda, as John likes to say.
You for sure.
I was busy that day. Nate, do you have I did not blow up Nord Stream. Thank you, though.
У вас лично, может быть, есть алиби. У вас лично.
You personally may have an alibi, but the CIA has no such alibi.
Do you have evidence that NATO or the CIA did it?
Вы знаете,
You know, I won't get into details, but people always say in such cases, look for someone who is interested. But in this case, we should not only look for someone who is interested, but also for someone who has capabilities.
I thought he was going to look at him.
Question, and that's
I honestly thought he was going to look at him and say, "What's evidence?"
But that was a very how do we say, very political answer. Do you have evidence? Let me first start out by not answering your question. And while I'm not answering your question, I want to remind you of this: platitude, 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 general statement.
Yeah,
that's what we saw. That's literally what
I think that's a little bit of a reduction. He obviously did not give evidence. It would have been nice if he gave evidence or gave details. There's multiple reasons why he might not have given details. It's possible he just doesn't have any. That's my suspicion. But like saying that when you're trying to find the culprit, look at who has the motive and the means is not like a completely empty platitude. That's like
that was some
Miss America. Bad guy doesn't mean you gotta
John.
That was some Miss America shit from Putin there. One thing I wanted to ask John. So I felt that was the most nervous I've ever seen both of those guys. Oh, we're hearing some. That's the most nervous, John, I've heard or seen both of those guys ever. Tucker Carlson and Putin. Do you guys agree?
I totally agree.
They both looked like they were just like shrinked in their chair, like this is bigger than both of us. Like they seem to like really be on edge.
I agree. At one point, this has been memed to death. At one point, Tucker said Hitler's been dead for 80 years, hasn't he? And like Putin has like a nervous groan. And I'm like, what does that mean? No, the interview was very interesting. It like Putin like waxed on for like 35 minutes, like at the very beginning about like the intricacies of like Russian history.
And he also never failed to bring up on multiple occasions how he was commenting on Tucker's question, not that like, oh, I see what you're trying to do there.
No, he went KGB mode. At one point, he's like, "Oh, the CIA didn't let you in. Thank God for that." And like Tucker's like, "What does that mean? I don't understand." Because that could be a compliment or an insult.
It honestly sounds to me like we have another paranoid old dude in office.
Yes.
Another paranoid. He just used things. The CIA is fucking it. The Mossad, the fucking FBI. They're all like,
Russia. I think it's kind of an obligation to be a little bit paranoid. Like, all of NATO exists to oppose you.
But I think that it's super clear. He said you have evidence? The answer was no, they don't have evidence. I think that Putin is doing what a lot of people do, which is make people afraid, talk about like the deep state, the people behind the shadow, the people behind the curtain. And I just like to think the governments are more incompetent than that. I've seen how governments operate. I know people who work in government, and from all of my understanding, it's being held together by a very thin thread of basic incompetency.
You know what I get from Putin? I get from like, no, you wouldn't understand anyway. I'll handle it. Don't ask me for evidence. Like, I got this. Like his answers seem like, no, I'm not going to offer anything. I'm not going to give anything of substance up. Just, trust me on this one. That's what I get from Putin. And that's where he's like different. Some people I've seen since this interview have been comparing him to like Russia's Trumpian gift to the world is Vladimir Putin. I think Trump and him are very, very different. I think Donald Trump's this neurotic guy that wears everything on his sleeve, and Putin's very calculated and very much like he doesn't think he owes anything, any information to the world. He's going to hold that information back. So
interesting.
Yeah. I generally agree with that.
I think Trump is calculated. I think he's just more loose. He's like, if I thought of like Trump and Putin in like UFC terms, like Trump would be like Colby Covington. He just kind of comes forward and just tries to turn this into a wild fight. So he looks like he doesn't have like a meta idea, but he does. And then like, I don't know, Putin would be, like George St. Pierre, very calculated, very clean, very. Well, but they're both incredible fighters,
But I mean, if we are to take, okay, now let's think about them in a superhero way. What is their superpower? Maybe Trump and Putin, both of their superpowers are deception. Maybe that's where they're united.
Can we call, how about swamp?
I think that's every politician's superpower, but I would argue they're particularly good at it.
Maybe.
But what's the big? But real quick, before we go completely off topic, and which is fine, and we can. What is the big deal, though? Why is it such a big deal that Tucker interviews Putin? Because I think if Tucker interviewed Putin 2-3 years before the Ukraine conflict, no one would have an issue with it.
Yeah,
I think I'll give mine. I think it was maybe the most candid, unscripted version of Putin on offer to the world.
Mm-hmm.
And he looked like a little scared midget in that conversation, because I don't think it was as a controlled environment as he's used to. Now I say that just in the sense of it didn't look like he knew the questions that were going to be asked, or the follow-up questions that Tucker was asking. That's the sense I got. This is speculation, but I think that might be one of the reasons. To me, it just felt like much more spontaneous interview than we almost have ever seen from Putin.
I totally agree. I think that this is definitely why it's so big in the interim after the fact. I think, again, it's been memed to death. Like, again, Putin opened this interview with, "Give me a minute to give you a little bit of historical context for the Russian-Ukraine conflict." And then he waxes on for 35 minutes like a boomer. And, like, that's how you can tell. Like, this guy doesn't really, as you said, he's calculated. He doesn't feel like he owes people information. I imagine he doesn't have to answer the press the way that American politicians do. But it was a big deal even before we knew what the interview was. People were losing their minds. I'm pretty sure the EU sanctioned Tucker for, like, doing this, which is crazy, which is demented. And why that it was so big even before the interview out, just the concept of a journalist like Tucker going and, interviewing Putin at this time was so massive. I think the answer to that question is a more interesting one. And I'm curious what you guys think about the answer to that particular question.
I think Putin was in control. And I think the fact that you think what you're thinking is because he did a good job. I don't think.
I love unfalsifiable claims. That's my favorite.
I mean, yeah, of course. I mean, we're all saying unfalsifiable. We're all saying unfalsifiable here. We're all saying unfalsifiable. And I'll tell you why I think so.
What am I even thinking? What do you think I'm thinking? I don't understand.
I think this. I don't think Biden would find himself in a situation where he couldn't control the outcome. I think that the only place, and this is why, like, presidential candidates know I'm doing a debate on Fox, it's going to be this way. The debate here, it's going to be that way. This is why we have guests who have so much anxiety and they're so nervous. Oh, what are the questions going to be about? What can't, we try to bring on these guests, and there's these paranoid guests who can't even have a normal conversation with someone because of that fear of the unscripted. I think, and it's unfalsifiable, I think that Putin would not be putting himself in that situation. I think that he knew what the conversation was going to be on, and Tucker had to divulge some of those questions to him. And I think that Putin wanted to look very, like, relaxed and off guard, and this is nothing. This is whatever it is. But I think we saw very.
I actually imagine you're right.
I think you're right, Don. But what I'm getting at is that even when you know that these things, what you know is going to be asked and what the interview is going to entail, there are some versions of those that seem more spontaneous and open than others.
Okay.
And I'm saying that this one just had an aesthetic air of that to Putin, because I've watched a lot of Putin's interviews in the past. He just didn't seem so clean and polished in his response, like he was as prepared. Maybe he's getting a bit older. Maybe that was it. But there was something unique about it, and I think that's why it's going so viral.
I see.
No, I totally agree. And when I said unfalsifiable, I meant your claims about why I think what I think, Don. But
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
No, I enjoy the occasional and lighthearted bit of mind reading.
I can't help it. I'm a psych major, John. I've learned my entire education is by knowing what you think without you knowing what you're thinking.
Yeah,
but
it keeps
Don is also a certified drama farmer, so he's got his, he's got a lot of talent in.
But again, do you guys think it's good that the EU was considering? I don't know if they actually sanctioned it, but at least considering sanctioning Tucker for this? Why do you think it was such a big deal that Tucker even dared to interview
Well,
one of the most important.
Because Tucker is adult and Putin is just going to embolden his base. I really like that's really what I think. Like, you know who I thought would have been
That's exactly what
you
they
know who
wanted.
I think would have been a way better interviewer.
Who?
I might get flack for this. Joe Rogan.
That's actually true.
This is my statement. I think Joe Rogan would have done a better job pushing back against Putin than Tucker, because Joe Rogan approaches every conversation.
Joe Rogan would
little
have
moron.
On his
Okay,
walkout.
He goes into a conversation like he's an idiot, and when Putin's trying to ask him, he's gonna just keep asking him questions, be like, "Well, bro," like he's just gonna keep pushing it forward and let Putin just kind of like roll
feed
in
him.
his own, feed him.
Yeah.
But Tucker is look, they're scared the whole time. They were both like just there, like on edge, just like seeing if they can finish this through without any stepping on anyone's toes.
Well, I mean, if I had my way, if I could throw my pick in there, and maybe we'll go to John next for his ultimate pick, but I would throw Vladimir Putin on the Howard Stern show and see how that treats him.
Ooh, that's a big one. Get him to ride a Sabian. That would be
ride the Sabian,
bro. What do I think? Who would be a good interviewer? I don't know. I really like the Joe Rogan pick. I really like.
Okay, fine. I'll get a different one than Joe Rogan. It's a different one than Joe Rogan. Alex Jones.
Alex Jones. That would be so funny. Yeah, that's better. That's even better. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't.
Do you have evidence the frogs are gay? And Putin be like, well, I can't confirm or deny that, but I can tell you that the CIA both has the motive.
I feel like
the opportunity.
I feel like Alex Jones might be the only person who would actually know the Russo-Ukrainian history in as much like painful and irrelevant detail as Putin does. But I mean, when I look at an interview, even against somebody like Putin, I actually don't really go in expecting an interrogation. Maybe that's why that doesn't bother me. And, maybe, I'm a, easy to convince idiot or something. But like, I'm not really looking for an interrogation. I'm looking for questions to be asked and a few follow-up questions to be asked and the guy to give his answer. And, if he's stupid or avoidant, then we can notice that and it's fine. But like, when I look at an interview, I'm not really expecting it like, balls to the wall interrogation. It's not really what I expect or I'm looking for. So when people get on, Tucker for not like asking like the fifth or sixth pressured follow-up question while he's sitting in the middle of the Kremlin with Vladimir Putin, like I like that's not a criticism I take super seriously. Maybe I'm brainwashed by the dolts.
I wonder how many sniper rifles were pointed at Tucker Carlson during that interview.
There was a nerve agent in your bloodstream. You get the antidote at the end of the interview.
Dude, I would be afraid that if I just asked the question a little bit wrong, like my flight on the way back would be canceled. We had permanent bomb threat at the airport. So I'm going to wait somewhere. And then I got lost in the streets of Moscow. And now I'm just,
Yeah. And then I start smelling mustard. And then I'm standing right before the Lord at the pearly gates.
Trav comes to religion in the oddest way possible.
Well, we are at the hour mark. 1 hour has gone and the show is over, everyone. So I want to remind everyone who's still here with us, please click like, subscribe, ring that bell notification, and we do this every single Sunday. I have my own show at Don Prager, Pangburn Universe. I post clips, interviews, and I do my own videos and my own live streams with different guests every week. John, the same. John, plug yourself in real quick.
It's John Parker PU. It's an associated account with the main Pangburn channel. I do lots of the same stuff, but even cooler.
Wow, of course.
I mean, come on, value sets, buddy.
And please join us on Discord. The link is in the description. I'm going to hang out there in the after show in about 10-15 minutes after I grab some dinner. I don't know if Travis will be there. I know John will come in probably much later after his...
Yeah, I'll be there for a bit. Hopefully you guys stop in and say hello. I'll actually drop the Discord link for you guys right in the comment section right now so you guys can join up. And for those of you who are not... familiar with Discord is a place that we have voice channels where people are engaging in chats like we're doing right now. And we also have the Pangburn library there, which is a library of various text chats that are separated by category and topic, that you can jump in and engage in text debates with people in the server. We have 2,500 members, I think. And there's a lot of us who are active having voice chats all day and most of the time into the late hours of the night. And everyone's welcome. You just have to engage in good faith and helpfulness. So you got to be helpful and you got to be good faith. Sincerity of intentions. So come there to have good conversations. But there's the link for you guys.
Yes. And remember, Alex O'Connor, Dinesh D'Souza, buy your tickets at pang.com.
Imminent.
Pang-burn.com. I'll be there. Travis will be there. John will be there.
June 1st.
As always, everyone, stay thinking, and we'll see you next week. Same time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific.
I want to talk about a remarkable phenomenon that is going on in Asia and Africa, namely the large-scale conversion of Muslims to Christianity. There was a complaint by a guy on Al Jazeera who said that by his count, 6 million Muslims are converting to Christianity each year.
Christians have been saying two things. Number one, God is eternal. Eternal meaning not living forever on and on and on. Eternal in the sense of outside of time. And this concept of eternity, which seemed from a scientific point of view incoherent, now makes complete sense. If God is outside the universe, he's outside of time.
Far from being unable to escape God, there is a very real contingent of non-believers, and I would count myself among their number, who are unable by any means to discover him, who seek and do not find, who knock and receive, as it were, no answer. I think it would be great if God existed. I really do. I would absolutely love to escape death. I would relish being the recipient of unconditional love. Less selfishly, I would love to be able to worship that which deserves to be worshipped. I just don't think it's true. Now, try as I might, look where I can, I find no response, no hint, nothing.